Hello viewers. Welcome to Seek Wisdom. Today we are presenting you the summary of the book, The Psychology of Money, written by Morgan Housel. Published in September 2020, it is one of the best books on personal finance in current times. The premise of this book is that doing well with money has a little to do with how smart you are and a lot to do with how you behave. Regarding financial success or failure, there are two explanations. 1. Financial outcomes are driven by luck, independent of intelligence and effort. 2. That financial success is not a hard science. It's a soft skill, where how you behave is more important than what you know. A janitor, Ronald Reed, was in news in 2014, when he died. Why? Because his will declared his worth of $8 million, out of which $6 million was to be donated. He turned from a janitor to a philanthropist. How? He was not inherited any wealth, no lottery. What he did was, just using this soft skill, which is known as the psychology of money. Finance has scooped up the smartest minds coming from top universities over the last 2 decades. We don't have realistic views about what money does, and doesn't do, to our happiness because we are taught about money like physics with rules and laws, and not enough like psychology. Everyone has their own unique experience with how the world works. And what you've experienced is more compelling than what you learned second-hand. So all of us go through life anchored to a set of views about how money works that vary wildly from person to person. The challenge for us is that no amount of studying or open-mindedness can genuinely recreate the power of fear and uncertainty. In theory, people should make investment decisions based on their goals and the characteristics of the investment options available to them at the time. But that's not what people do. Their lifetime investment decisions are heavily anchored to the experiences they had in their own generation. Those people can be misinformed. They can have incomplete information. They can be persuaded by rotten marketing. They can misjudge the consequences of their actions. Similarly, it should surprise no one that many of us are bad at saving and investing for retirement. We all do crazy stuff with money, because we're all relatively new to this game, and what looks crazy to you might make sense to others. But no one is crazy. We all make decisions based on our own unique experiences that seem to make sense to us in a given moment. The world is big and complex. Luck and risk are both real and hard to identify. Realize that not all success is due to hard work, and not all poverty is due to laziness. Do so when judging both yourself and others. Risk and luck are doppelgangers. This is not an easy problem to solve. The difficulty in identifying what is luck, what is skill, and what is risk is one of the biggest problems we face when trying to learn about the best way to manage money. Bill Gates once said, "Success is a lousy teacher. It seduces smart people into thinking they can't lose. But the same is true in the other direction. Failure can be a lousy teacher, because it seduces smart people into thinking their decisions were terrible, when sometimes they just reflect the unforgiving realities of risk. The trick when dealing with failure is arranging your financial life in a way that a bad investment here and a missed financial goal there won't wipe you out, so you can keep playing until the odds fall in your favor. The hardest financial skill is getting the goalpost to stop moving. If expectations rise with results, there is no logic in striving for more because you'll feel the same after putting in extra effort. It gets dangerous when the taste of having more increases ambition faster than satisfaction. Wanting to surpass your peers can be the fuel of hard work. We should realize that enough is not too little. Enough is realizing that the opposite will push you to the point of regret. Next comes the power of compounding. We all know about net worth of Warren Buffett. There are numerous books mentioning his strategies, but Buffett's fortune isn't due to just being a good investor, but being a good investor since he was literally a child. His skill is investing, but his secret is time. Compounding works best when you can give a plan years or decades to grow. Today, we can see 100 ways to be wealthy, but what about staying wealthy? There is only one way, some combination of frugality and paranoia. Getting money requires taking risks, being optimistic, and putting yourself out there. But keeping money requires the opposite of taking risk. It requires humility, and fear that what you've made can be taken away from you just as fast. The ability to stick around for a long time, without wiping out or being forced to give up, is what makes the biggest difference. This is surviving mentality. Applying the survival mindset to the real world comes down to appreciating three things. 1. More than I want big returns, I want to be financially unbreakable. And if I'm unbreakable, I actually think I'll get the biggest returns, because I'll be able to stick around long enough for compounding to work wonders. 2. Planning is important, but the most important part of every plan is to plan on the plan not going according to plan. 3. A barbed personality. Optimistic about the future, but paranoid about what will prevent you from getting to the future, is vital. Become okay with a lot of things going wrong. You can be wrong half the time and still make a fortune, because a small minority of things account for the majority of outcomes. No matter what you're doing with your money, you should be comfortable with a lot of stuff not working. So you should always measure how you've done by looking at your full portfolio, rather than individual investments. That's usually the best case scenario. People want to become wealthier to make them happier. Happiness is a complicated subject because everyone's different. The ability to do what you want, when you want, with who you want, for as long as you want, is priceless. It is the highest dividend money pays. Use money to gain control over your time, because not having control of your time is such a powerful and universal drag on happiness. Be nicer and less flashy. No one is impressed with your possessions as much as you are. You might think you want a fancy car or a nice watch. But what you probably want is respect and admiration. And you're more likely to gain those things through kindness and humility than horsepower and chrome. Learning to be happy with less money creates a gap between what you have and what you want. A high savings rate means having lower expenses. Spending beyond a pretty low level of materialism is mostly a reflection of ego approaching income, spending money to show people that you have money. Saving money is the gap between your ego and your income, and wealth is what you don't see. So wealth is created by suppressing what you could buy today in order to have more stuff or options in the future. No matter how much you earn, you will never build wealth unless you can put a lid on how much fun you can have with your money right now, today. Building wealth has little to do with your income or investment returns, and lots to do with your savings rate. One of the most powerful ways to increase your savings isn't to raise your income. It's to raise your humility. So people's ability to save is more in their control than they might think. Save. Just save. You don't need a specific reason to save. It's great to save for a car or a medical emergency. But saving for things that are impossible to predict or define is one of the best reasons to save. Everyone's life is a continuous chain of surprises. Manage your money in a way that helps you sleep at night. Next comes the role of historical data in financial planning. History is mostly the study of surprising events. But it is not, in any way, a map of the future. The cornerstone of economics is that things change over time, because the invisible hand hates anything staying too good or too bad indefinitely. Which means we can't treat historians as prophets. The majority of what's happening at any given moment in the global economy can be tied back to a handful of past events that were nearly impossible to predict. Also, history can be a misleading guide to the future of the economy and stock market because it doesn't account for structural changes that are relevant to today's world. Competition grew as opportunities became well known. Technology made information more accessible. and industries changed as the economy shifted from industrial to technology sectors, which have different business cycles and capital uses. There's a common phrase in investing, usually used mockingly, that it's different this time. That doesn't mean we should ignore history when thinking about money. Use history to take general takeaways like people's relationship to greed and fear, how they behave under stress, and how they respond to incentives tend to be stable in time. Worship room for error. A gap between what could happen in the future and what you need to happen in the future in order to do well is what gives you endurance, and endurance is what makes compounding magic over time. Room for error often looks like a conservative hedge, but if it keeps you in the game it can pay for itself many times over. One such room for error is optimism bias in risk-taking. You have to take risk to get ahead, but no risk that can wipe you out is ever worth taking. The danger is that rational optimism, most of the time, masks the odds of ruin some of the time. The result is we systematically underestimate risk. There are two things to keep in mind when making what you think are long-term decisions. We should avoid the extreme ends of financial planning. Assuming you'll be happy with a very low income, or choosing to work endless hours in pursuit of a high one, increases the odds that you'll one day find yourself at a point of regret. We should also come to accept the reality of changing our minds. The trick is to accept the reality of change and move on as soon as possible. Embracing the idea that financial goals made when you were a different person should be abandoned without mercy versus put on life support and dragged on can be a good strategy to minimize future regret. The quicker it's done, the sooner you can get back to compounding. It sounds trivial, but thinking of market volatility as a fee rather than a fine is an important part of developing the kind of mindset that lets you stick around long enough for investing gains to work in your favor. The trick is convincing yourself that the market's fee is worth it. That's the only way to properly deal with volatility and uncertainty. Not just putting up with it, but realizing that it's an admission fee worth paying. Define the game you're playing, and make sure your actions are not being influenced by people playing a different game. Before taking any financial advice or stock recommendation from anyone, ask yourself who you are, because the decision will vary if you are an investor or a day trader. Optimism is the best bet for most people because the world tends to get better for most people most of the time. But pessimism holds a special place in our hearts. Optimism is a belief that the odds of a good outcome are in your favor over time, even when there will be setbacks along the way. Pessimism just sounds smarter and more plausible than optimism. Tell someone that everything will be great, and they're likely to either shrug you off or offer a skeptic lie. Tell someone they're in danger, and you have their undivided attention. There are valid reasons why pessimism is seductive when dealing with money. It just helps to know what they are to ensure we don't take them too far. Organisms that treat threats as more urgent than opportunities have a better chance to survive. But a few other things make financial pessimism easy, common, and more persuasive than optimism. One is that money is ubiquitous, so something bad happening tends to affect everyone and captures everyone's attention. Another is that pessimists often extrapolate present trends without accounting for how markets adapt. A third is that progress happens too slowly to notice, but setbacks happen too quickly to ignore. We live in a story-driven world, which affect our decisions related to economies, career, investments. These stories are the fuel that can let the tangible parts of the economy work, or the brake that holds our capabilities back. At the personal level, there are two things to keep in mind about a story-driven world when managing your money. 1. The more you want something to be true, the more likely you are to believe a story that overestimates the odds of it being true. 2. Everyone has an incomplete view of the world. But we form a complete narrative to fill in the gaps. Charlie Munger once said, "I did not intend to get rich. I just wanted to get independent." Same is the philosophy of author, so he has mentioned his investment strategy in the last chapter of the book. He invests and recommends low-cost index funds. Here, we shall wind up the video. We hope this video shall be beneficial to you and we recommend to give this book a read. Thanks for your time.